true Cardinal fans that still live and breathe that Cardinal way. I can only imagine how it hit them. You don't need fan graphs. You don't need StatCasts. You don't need fake formulas. For real news and analysis and stories from the National League Central, it's time to open the files at Central Intelligence, an OK Baseball podcast presented by Slasher Sports. We drop and post our lineups every Thursday on the OK Baseball podcast Spotify feed, as well as on our YouTube channel. I'm Special Agent in charge of National League Central Affairs, Steve Feck, your host, and each week we do background checks on the 5 National League Central teams, kind of talk about what happened in the past week, see what's kind of going on with them. Then we might open up some investigations into an interesting topic. We're going to talk about David Freese today. He probably best exemplifies what the true Cardinal way used to be, as opposed to what's going on now. But we'll talk about him declining to be inducted into the Cardinals Hall of Fame. You don't see many players do that. I mean that's pretty amazing. Let's just get right to it. I mean, a lot happened, in the National League Central last week. I don't want to necessarily go through every box score or things like that. We're going to just do literally background checks. We'll kind of figure out, okay, what exactly happened last week. Now, the London series is coming up. And so the Cubs and Cardinals are going to be off until Saturday. They're flying to London, getting themselves all adjusted. I thought no one cared about the NL Central. It's very interesting that, MLB handpicked the Cardinals and the Cubs, National League Central teams, to play in really a showcase, high-focus event. Now, again, are the Cardinals and Cubs historical franchises? Well, of course they are. But bottom line is, what if the Cardinals and Cubs were on a true downslide? The Cardinals are on a downslide here in 2023. But what if the Cubs and Cardinals were fighting it out for last place? There's still the interest in the teams in the National League Central. The results in the standings don't necessarily reflect on fan interest in the teams in the division. Okay, have the records been poor over the last couple of seasons with the exception of the Brewers and the Cardinals? Okay, I'll grant you that. But overall, people are interested in the 5 teams in the National League Central. So I thought, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for people that are tuning in, saying, why would anybody be doing a National League Central podcast? This is why. There's so many fun things happening right now in 2023. But in general, the National League Central is underappreciated. It's an underrated division, and that's why. I had my choice. Slasher Sports and OK Baseball podcast said pick a division, whatever division you want, pick it. Now, living in Pittsburgh, the National League Central makes sense because, well, I get to see more NL Central baseball than other divisions, even with this crazy, bingo card schedule that we have now where everybody plays everybody, home and away and things like that. But I just thought it was really interesting that people are going to all be excited and tune into this London series and their 2 National League Central teams in the bad National League Central. Cubs and Cardinals are in different situations right now. And, I kind of wonder if the Cubs are going to, since they have, in essence, 2 days off. Yes, there's traveling and all that, but there's 2 days off. I wonder if they are going to showcase, their best pitcher, their star really of the year for the Cubs, Marcus Stroman. He's on a 7-start win streak. He leads the league in innings pitched at this point. In theory, and Stroman has pitched on short rest before, and it would really only be 1 day when you consider that he's not going to be doing any physical activities while they're traveling and all. I wonder if they'll pitch him on Sunday. I haven't seen the probables. So by the time that you listen and watch, this Central Intelligence episode. Perhaps that question's already answered, but I would think that there might be some nudging from the commissioner's office to maybe have Marcus Stroman start on relatively regular rest. I mean, this trip is going to really mess up pitching rotations and bullpen uses anyway for both teams. I mean, it did with the Yankees and the Red Sox. There's going to be 8 billion runs scored because of the odd configuration, of the ball field. But it would be nice to see Marcus Stroman, get that showcase. He can't pitch Saturday. I understand that, but he could pitch Sunday. So let's see if they actually do that. But Marcus Stroman has just been money. He's been just absolute money this year. It's been an absolute joy to watch him pitch with such joy. That emotion isn't fake. That's Marcus Stroman at his core. What you see is what you get. When we talked about Marcus Stroman in an earlier episode, I kept repeating that. What you see is what you get. I had the pleasure of getting to watch him early in his career when he was coming up with the Blue Jays, because I cover the Blue Jays, and that's my American League side, if you will, or the Toronto Blue Jays. But it would really be fun to see Stroman pitch in such a high-profile event. And for the Cubs, this series actually is really kind of important because they're on a pretty good roll. They swept the Pirates twice in the last 10 days. Maybe they can string together a few winning weeks between now and the All-Star break. And if that happens, they keep taking care of business, that would kind of line them up when they meet the Brewers. I think there's a series that bookends the All-Star break between the Cubs and the Brewers. Perhaps, that could actually, I think it's the Reds that bookend the All-Star break. I apologize for that. But still, I mean, that would put the Cubs at the forefront and in the conversation going into the All-Star break, and then obviously leading up then the 2 weeks after that, going into the trading deadline, which is August 1st this year. That's a date you want to mark on your calendar, because I think every team in the National League Central is going to be active at the deadline, whether they're sellers or buyers or a little bit of both. Might be a little bit too early to know for sure, but we certainly will dig into that here in future episodes of Central Intelligence. The Brewers continued their dominance over Pittsburgh, especially at home this past weekend. It's a very entertaining series. I mean, for Pirate fans, maybe not so much because they got swept, and they're on a pretty tough losing streak here. They had just been swept by the Cubs before they went to Milwaukee. But they were very entertaining games. I mean, the games, except for the shutout, the Wade Miley shutout, he only went 5 innings, but the bullpen kind of picked him up in that 5-0 shutout. But, the opener was a 1-run game. Joey Wiemer homered in each of the first 2 contests. They even had the little, which I still laugh about. They had a barber, and they would give fans a free Joey Wiemer mullet cut if they wanted it. I mean, not many people can pull off a mullet. I think John Kruk might have been the last guy in Major League Baseball that effectively pulled off a mullet. But Joey Wiemer, he is just, every week he gets better and better. And I know I've said this a million times already. He is the 21st century version of Gorman Thomas. Not as stocky, doesn't have the bad mustache, but Joey Wiemer, he is a special player, and we're watching him develop and grow right before our eyes. The Brewers, they just need to tread water. They just need to keep pace with everyone else, because as players come back, I think the Brewers will be able to pull away. I think there's something about Brewer baseball, the way they play baseball, that translates well into the postseason, and I think it will translate well post trade deadline and into September, into the September pennant race. I mean, because they do everything well. I don't know that they do, other than their bullpen. I don't know that there's one aspect of their team that they are outstanding at. They still have a lot of injuries on their pitching staff. Willie Adames has not really gotten going. Owen Miller is slumping. But they always find a way somehow. Someone is stepping up every day to do something special. And Julio Teheran, he was marvelous against the Pirates. He gave up 2 runs, but he only allowed 1 hit. He's still having some control problems as he has throughout his career. He pitched well again, gave up no runs in their loss to the Diamondbacks, in the Diamondback series. But I think the Brewers have just enough that they just need to go slow and steady. This isn't a sprint. This isn't September yet. And slow and steady wins the marathon, wins the distance race. If they can just keep pace, they don't even have to necessarily be in first place going into September, but if they are close, I think the Brewers' brand of baseball and Craig Counsell and his just innate ability to see things innings ahead and plan accordingly and have him work out 9 times out of 10 when he makes those things. I think the Brewers still have to be considered the favorite, in the division. The Cardinals, they go into London playing better. I mean, they're still not the Cardinals that we would expect. I think they took care of business against the Mets pretty well. They won that series. They did relatively well against the Nationals. So they're taking advantage of teams that are struggling or that are just less talented and less deep than they are. But the Cardinals dug themselves a deep hole. And I really still don't know if they're going to dig their way out of it. And if I was Ali Marmol, despite the good weekend, I would personally watch the clubhouse people pack his gear and pack his stuff and make sure it gets on the bus to get on the plane to London. I'm shocked that they did not take the opportunity to make the manager change. At this point, I think it's inevitable, and the Cardinals need something external off the field to, I think, jolt them and kind of give them that slap in the face and say, whoa, 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 come on, let's get going. You're the Cardinals. So we'll see what happens, see how they bounce back after, the trip to London. Of course, we have to talk about the Cincinnati Reds. I'm sure a lot of you are saying, what's taking you so long to talk about the Cincinnati Reds? That's all you've done for weeks now, to talk about the Cincinnati Reds. Well, was I right? I think I was. I mean, did I predict an 11-game winning streak? I didn't go that far. But the Reds, are really putting everything together. And normally, when you would talk about a big series win like they had against Houston, you would just say, normal conversation, the Reds beat the Astros. I'm going to say the Reds beat the Astros. I mean, they put a beating on the defending world champion. I mean, do the Astros missing players? Yes, so are the Reds. They had to go in their system and bring up all this talent. It's almost becoming like a Tampa Bay Rays situation where, okay, well, when are you going to run out of position players or pitchers to bring up to fill in holes to play a role? When's it going to stop in Cincinnati? And I don't think it's gonna. It's and let me say this too. I think it's time to put to rest for the rest of the 2023 season all of this, oh yeah, but it's a small sample size bullshit conversation. The Reds are for real. These young guys aren't just coming up and having flash in the pan seasons. These are all guys that were in their top 30. Most of them were in the MLB top 100 or on the outskirts of being in the MLB top 100 prospects. They've played together. Most of them have played together in the minor leagues over the last 2 years. They certainly have some familiarity with each other, having maybe been brought up, like the Spears of the world and Williamsons of the world coming up, going down, over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. This has been building, but I think the Reds being so bad and attendance falling off so much, I think distracted the average baseball fan and probably even discouraged, the average Reds fan from really examining what was happening in the minor leagues. And there's still 3 guys that are not on the 26-man roster now that are in not only the Reds' top 30, but they're in Major League Baseball's among the top 70 prospects that we haven't really seen for extended times yet that the Reds could still bring up. So this is a story that is not going to go away. It should not be overlooked. It's a story that's going to really define what the 2023 season ultimately is. I'm not saying the Reds are going to win the World Series. I mean, they could. I mean, they'd have to really be active and add pitching depth. Not that their pitching has been terrible, but beyond Hunter Green and Andrew Abbott, do they really have a starter that you can put out there in a playoff series and feel good about either winning the third game or getting one solid performance out of them in a more expanded series? I think they're going to have to be active. And because of all this prospect depth, they can. I think the Reds, more than the Pirates, let's say, are more likely to go for it, to actually use their prospect capital. Are they ahead of schedule? I think in the Reds' eyes, I don't think they think they're ahead of schedule. All these projections and all of these analysts and talking heads all dismissed, well, the Reds are still a ways away. They didn't do their homework, or they underestimated the fact that the Reds were willing to bring these young players up early. And now they have Joey Votto back. We were talking about this in last week's episode. I mean, this is the greatest back from the dead story since Lazarus. Okay, Joey Votto, in his first game back, produced runs, and you can see he has that love again. And it's everything that we kind of touched upon in our last episode. If Votto can come in and play any kind of a role, he's not going to be the MVP type Joey Votto anymore, I don't think. If he does that, then we need to think about it being a damn Yankee situation where he sold his soul so that he could have one last time in the sun and get the Reds, to the World Series. But seriously, Joey Votto is going to have an impact that goes well beyond what you're going to see in a box score. Don't expect Joey Votto to play every day. I mean, now he has since he's come back, but I mean, they're going to he's going to be a situational player. And to keep him healthy, I mean, if they have him in the playoffs, now suddenly you have to be talking about the Reds being one of the favorites, especially if they win the division. They'd have to be one of the favorites to go to at least the NLCS. I mean, Votto is a once in a lifetime talent for Cincinnati, and it's, he picked up where Eric Davis left off, and then where all those guys in the Big Red Machine left off, and then the teams in the '90s. He's that guy, and he's somebody that you want to root for. He's absolutely fearless. He will talk about anything. He will tell you why he's struggling. He'll tell you about his problems. He'll tell you what's going on in the clubhouse and what the team needs to do. So having Joey Votto back is going to have a huge impact. And thanks to this 11th game winning streak, which is their longest since 1957. So obviously, the Big Red Machine of the 70s never had a winning streak this long. Even the 61 World Series Reds that had like Frank Robinson and Eddie Casco and Bob Perky and all of those guys, they never had a winning streak like this. So what's happening is special. And it allows the Reds to stumble once, maybe even twice between now and the end of the season, because they've got this cushion built in. But that 11-game winning streak has made them the fourth National League Central team to sit alone in first place this year. We had the Pirates, we had the Cubs, we had the Brewers. Brewers and Pirates had the most extended time in first place, and now we've got the Cincinnati Reds. And as I mentioned earlier, I misspoke when I said, well, it's going to be the Cubs playing the Brewers, kind of bookending the All-Star break. It's actually the Reds. Before we get that far, while everybody's falling over each other and watching the London series, the Reds are playing the Braves. And the Braves are probably facing a doubleheader because they're having a rain situation to finish out their series against Philly. So they're going to be coming off of a doubleheader and then having to come to St. Louis. And then they play the Orioles. And then they play the Padres. If they can win 2 games in each of those series, I want to say the Orioles is a 4-game series, but if they win 2 in each of those series, home and home series before and after the All-Star break with the Brewers, that might very well decide the NL Central. It's never over till it's over, as old Yogi Berra used to say. But, if the Reds keep this up and the Brewers are looking up when they go into those 2 series and the Reds can win those series, I think now suddenly the Reds, not that they'll relax, but now they can say, okay, we have achieved something else. We have proven we are the first place team. So it's going to be fascinating leading up, not just the All-Star break, but leading up to the trade deadline. I would imagine that trades are going to start happening sooner. Now, as hot as Cincinnati has been during this 11-game stretch, and really over the last 6 weeks, they have been one of the best teams in Major League Baseball. Pittsburgh has been polar vortex cold. They've been swept twice by the Cubs and been swept by the Brewers, their divisional rivals, over the last 10 days. But it's interesting because in an interview that I read today from Justice De Los Santos, who covers the Pirates, Pirates president Travis Williams compared the positive winning vibes, he called them winning vibes, in the clubhouse, in the stands, in the city. He was comparing it to the 2008 Penguins that had Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, the year before they went on to win a Stanley Cup. This is when they went to the finals against Detroit, lost, and then they beat Detroit after that. And Williams worked for the Penguins more on the business end, and that's why Bob Nutting cherry-picked him when they also hired Ben Cherington to be the GM, because they wanted that connection. Williams obviously was there when the Penguins were bad enough to get Sidney Crosby as the first pick in the draft and see that team build and then eventually become a dominant force in the league. And that ultimately is Ben Cherington's plan. This is really the first time, and again, I say this all the time because I want to be honest. I live in Pittsburgh. Do I have a leaning toward Pittsburgh in this horse race? Yes, I do. But I love the division. I love their very low-key rivalries. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, I think, has been a rivalry going back to the days of Clemente and Stargell in the 70s. Kind of spilled over again into the late 80s, early 90s. Different divisions. Obviously at that time, Cardinals and Cubs, I think it ebbs and flows. I think, the Pirate fans don't like the Cardinals because the Cardinals have always been the gold standard. And the Pirates have been almost like a running joke since Bob Nutting bought the team. And after they started selling off after the 13, 14, and 15 years when they were in the playoffs. But it's for the first time since Andrew McCutchen left in 2017. Remember that this go-round is a return for Andrew McCutchen, who was drafted and developed. and was the star of those Pirate teams, in 13, 14, and 15. That I think that Pirate fans are allowing themselves to believe. I remember back in the day, that was their symbol, believe. For those of you watching on the YouTube channel, I'm blocking out my face, so it's a double value there by me blocking off my face doing this. But I think they're starting to believe. I mean, it's almost like the Pirates are sort of like that shelter dog that had been abused, that you take in your house and that you love. They're always going to be gun shy. No matter how well things are, no matter how fat they get, no matter how much they get played with or petted or loved, they're always going to be jumpy because of what happened before. Pirate fans are waiting for something bad to happen. I think if you hooked up Ben Cherington to a lie detector, had him take a polygraph test, he would have to admit that he's relieved that the Pirates have fallen back down to earth. They're now playing with more realistic outcomes than they were early in the year. Doesn't mean the Pirates are a 100-loss team anymore. They are not. Doesn't mean the Pirates stink. They do not. But Cherington all along had this in mind. This was the year that they transitioned from being jokes in also-rans into contenders. I'm going to compare it to the Pirate teams after Leland took over as the manager, and they had a little bit of turmoil in the front office, sort of. But Sid Thrift, I could do it. I need to do a bedtime story about Sid Thrift and his time in Pittsburgh. He helped set up the Pirates to be so good, in the early 90s, but he was a piece of work. But anyway, I think there's a lot of parallels there. They showed moments of really playing good baseball, but it took until 1988, 1989 for it to be consistent. And you have to remember, the Pirates didn't go through a rebuild. Ben Cherington and Travis Williams, for all intents and purposes, are building an expansion team in Pittsburgh. Even though the team name and colors and everything is all the same, they had to truly start from scratch. There was almost nothing in the system for them to build upon or on the major league roster. They all left either through bad trades or through free agency or just getting old. So the Pirates are almost like an expansion team. So even though 5-year plans failed like in the Soviet Union, they're not going to fail along the Three Rivers. This is really year 4. And it has allowed Ben Cherington to work guys into the lineup. Luis Ortiz, who was their number 3 prospect going into the season, he's now in the rotation. Ji-Hwan Bae, I want to say, was 29th or 30th. He was down lower on the list, but he has been a revelation. He is so much fun to watch. Ji-Hwan Bae. They play him on the infield, but really, I think his calling is center field. As good as Jack Sawinski is in center field, I think that's ultimately his calling. It allowed him to bring up the first round pick that Ben Cherington made that would make it to the majors, and that's Carmen. I'm going to mess up the name. I want to say it's Lajinsky. There's a silent M in the beginning. He was a pitcher, and I remember watching him pitch at South Carolina. He's pitching in relief out of the bullpen. I have to believe that is going to be their role. I know they still talk about wanting to have him be a rotation piece going forward, and certainly it's how they drafted him. But I think really what they're doing now is they're developing him as another reliable leverage reliever, late inning arm to help take a little bit of the pressure off of David Bednar. And they just brought up the number 1 overall pick in 2021, Henry Davis. Now, he was a catcher at Louisville, but he was a hitter at Louisville. Let's make that very, very clear. He was a hitter at Louisville. He was an okay catcher. He did okay in the minors. But, this year they've been playing him a lot in right field. While he was in the minors this year, he has had great slash lines all through the minors when he's been able to stay healthy. He has a propensity to be hit by pitchers and get hurt, have hand injuries. That's not necessarily good. But he's hitting at a 972 OPS at 2 stops at Altoona AA and AAA Indianapolis. They transitioned him out to right field. His first couple of games in right field, he didn't look lost. I don't know that he was comfortable there, but again, they see him now as a DH right fielder, maybe have him play some first base because their top prospect. Now, I know in the rankings he's number 2, but Andy Rodriguez is a catcher who can also play multiple positions. But I think now they can bring up Rodriguez, and I think they will at some point, probably after the All-Star break. They'll be able to bring him up. I think you're going to see a couple of Pirate prospects be worked into the system. That was the schedule that Ben Cherington had. The timeline that fans wanted is way different. I mean, they already wanted Rodriguez now. They don't understand why he's not there. They don't understand why Nick Gonzalez isn't up. I think there are other people that they can bring up and work up. I think we're going to see Quinn Priester in the Pirates rotation probably after the All-Star break. It allows Cherington to go back to his plan. So the Pirates aren't going to lose 100 games. I think they still have a shot at having a winning season if these young players can continue to develop and contribute. Because remember, Cherington also did a great job, like he did when he built the Red Sox World Series teams, of bringing in all of these role players, if you will. I mean, O'Neill Cruz is hurt, so we don't know what they're going to do with him. But, and they signed him and Brian Reynolds and Brian Hayes to long-term extensions. Whether they do that with Mitch Keller, hard to say. But they've got people like Tucapito Marcano and Castro. Sawinski came in on a trade. A lot of these players that might seem like they're stopgap, but they're going to be valuable bench tools as the Pirates continue to develop and become a real contender in the NL Central. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen there. Pirate fans need to chillax. Okay. The sky isn't falling. This isn't the old Pirate regime. Okay. If Cherington and Williams have been proven to you by now that they have a plan and it's going to work if they stick to the plan and don't give in and don't try to make, trades for the sake of PR like perhaps they did at certain times late in the 2010s, they're going to be just fine. Okay, so I want to do an investigation, if you will. I'm not even sure if it's an investigation. I want to give a report on David Freese. People, certainly Cardinal fans, love him, a hometown guy, a World Series hero. He had probably one of the biggest home runs in Cardinal post-series history. And that's saying a lot when you think about the players that have had playoff success in St. Louis, a number of world championships they've won. He is the golden boy for most St. Louis Cardinal fans. They have votes with fans, and they let fans vote on players that are going to be inducted into the Cardinals Hall of Fame. But David Freese isn't a Cooperstown Hall of Fame guy, but because of the impact of that postseason that he had, and it's one of the most impactful, impressive postseasons that I can remember, and I'm old, folks, okay? But, I mean, it was one of the most impressive postseason performances I've ever witnessed. The fans, who still love David Freese, even after he was moved out to Anaheim, they've selected him to be in their Cardinals Hall of Fame. David Freese, and you have to imagine, he gave this a lot of thought, because this is a kid that grew up a Cardinal fan, a hometown boy, to be inducted in the Cardinals Hall of Fame. The little boy in him would have to be dancing. But he decided, and he told the Cardinals, look, I do not think I'm worthy. I do not wish to accept my induction into the Cardinals Hall of Fame. Now, that's going to outrage some Cardinal fans and some curmudgeony baseball fans out there that just want something to complain about. And Cardinal fans need to relax too. This isn't a slap in the face. This isn't an insult. At no point did David Freese campaign or interview or talk about wanting that his long-time term goal is to be in the Cardinals Hall of Fame. He's never said that. What is unspoken here is that a player that had a lot of issues off of the field, admitted battles with alcoholism, admitted battles with depression and anxiety, he felt that he was not worth, because he could not give his absolute best. That World Series aside, I thought he was a very productive player, personally. He felt that he did not give the Cardinals his best. And this isn't a Dr. Phil show here, okay? I'm not trying to read into all of those things. And he really hasn't spoken about it. I'm sure at some point more will come out. But if you read a lot of the articles, in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, in St. Louis, you're going to read people that covered him, people that knew him, teammates that knew him. I mean, Mark DeRosa on MLB Central talked a little bit about it when the news broke, about what a great teammate he was, what a great player he was. That he worked hard and everything, but he had his demons. There were things that ultimately detracted from him being able to cash in on all of his talents and all of his physical abilities. He was not able to do that. At least in David Freese's mind, he did not do it to the extent that he felt he was able to. Now, he had good years when he went to Anaheim. He remained a productive player. He addressed his alcoholism. He addressed his struggles with depression and anxiety, and that doesn't just go away. But by all accounts, reading local articles and listening to local podcasts and radio shows, David Freese is happy now. He's happy with the man that he is now. So just because fans want to project their expectations and their feelings about him being a Hall of Famer doesn't mean that David Freese, for his own peace of mind, should accept it and go through the motions and whatever it is. I mean, I salute him. If I didn't have pajama pants on right now, I would stand up and give him a standing ovation. Trust me, you don't want to see that. It brings me back to the Cardinal way. That is what you would expect, not only a local kid coming up, someone that was drafted and developed in the Cardinals system back in the days, in the ways that they truly developed a system and a culture that goes back to before World War II and Branch Rickey. I mean, sure, there's adjustments and there's modernization, but there is a Cardinal way. Over the last couple of years, it can be argued that that Cardinal way has kind of veered off on a detour, if you want to be kind about it, or they're just building a new road and new bridges, and they're ignoring the road that they traveled and that was convenient and that was successful for all of those decades. What you see in the David Freese decision to decline to be inducted into the Cardinals Hall of Fame, that is a manifestation of the Cardinal way, or at least what it used to be. And while I am not a Cardinals fan, I always admired the way that they played baseball, that they developed talent, and that goes back when I was a kid. We're talking about Bob Gibson. We're talking about them trading for Lou Brock. We're talking about Curt Flood and Bill White, and going through the 70s, and Ted Simmons. They had Joe Torre there for a long time. And then you go into those great teams of the 80s under Whitey Herzog, and they had success under Tony La Russa. They won multiple world championships across multiple decades. And really, they did it following the tried and true, the proven road of the Cardinal way. I really hope they get back to that. As bad a year as they're having, they've already sold more than 3 million tickets. They're going to have more than 3 million players, come into that stadium. Busch Stadium, whatever it is, 3, 4, whatever that it is. They have always sold their stars and marketed their stars very, very well. They have Anheuser-Busch money in ownership. So when they need to spend it when they're good, they can. But it's almost like the people in charge, whether it be on the field and the coaching staff, up in the front office with John Mozeliak, ownership, it looks like everybody's looking for someone else to make a decision or do the right thing or say, okay, come on, boys, the Cardinal way. And really, it came to light when they let go Mike Schulte, a career guy, a guy that was there because he tried to exert some of that Cardinal way that he learned, Cardinal way of playing baseball, and he kind of bristled against it. So rather than trying to work something out with a guy that had been so loyal to that organization, they let him go and found the guy in Ali Marmol that was going to take those reports coming down from the front office and just apply them. So David Freese, once again, I salute you. Personally, it will always be one of the top 10 moments for me, and I'm not a Cardinal fan, that I will always remember about why I love baseball and why I tell others you need to remember that childhood love of baseball when you're a little boy or girl and you were playing, Little League and sandlot ball. Yeah, not competitively, just for fun or in the backyard playing wiffle ball. When I learned about this, I literally got a lump in my throat. I can only imagine how Cardinal fans that weren't overreacting and making it all about them, true Cardinal fans that still live and breathe that Cardinal way, I can only imagine how it hit them. Now the Cardinals are going to do something for David Freese, something different to honor him. Whether it might be a bobblehead, it might be just a David Freese night, and they should, because he's a hometown boy. He didn't handle, I think, playing for his hometown and living out his boyhood dream growing up a Cardinal fan, as well as, let's say, a David Bednar has in Pittsburgh. Different people, different mindsets. Some people have bad knees. Some people have bad elbows. Some people can't make connections sometimes. They struggle with depression and anxiety. They turn to substances to try to fill the hole or to make it easier to cope with. I mean, now, who's to say if David Freese was drafted by the Reds and had his career there, would he have had the same issues? Well, maybe, but I would think that David Freese would have still struggled with the issues that he has now come to manage. They never go away. Substance abuse is one day at a time. So he's dealing with anxiety, depression, whatever it would be. It's one day at a time. But he has found a way to be happy, to stabilize his life. So for me, he's already in a Hall of Fame. He won't have a plaque. The average person really won't think about it. This story is going to eventually die. It'll kind of peak again when he has his special day that the Cardinals are going to have for him. Then it's going to, except for the really hardcore baseball fan, it's going to fade away. But it shouldn't. So of all of my shows, if any of my Central Intelligence episodes need to hang in and need to stick around in some kind of archive, I hope it's this one because there's going to be baseball fans forever. Stories like David Freese will not come around very often. So, Cardinal fans, you need to stand up and applaud David Freese when he has that day. You need to don't fight it back. Don't shove it down like comedian Bill Burr always says. I mean, let it out. Let the emotion out. Shed that tear. Shout loud. Let him know how special he was to you, whether it be in your childhood or just your general fandom. How proud of you are of him from being a local guy, a local kid made good. And for people that aren't Cardinal fans, and especially in the NL Central among their rivals, maybe it's easy for in your fan bases to be jealous of the Cardinals, to hate the Cardinals. You need to put that aside right now. You need to swallow that too. And you need to stand up and give a standing O for David Freese because it is one of the best baseball stories of my life. Him being so honest with himself that he wasn't going to just take an award because fans voted it. He was only going to take that award if he earned it. And for whatever reason, right or wrong, whether you agree or not, he turned it down. So that's something, again, yet another reason of the infinite number of reasons that you need to follow the 5 teams in the National League Central Division. Don't focus just on the records, okay? Learn the stories, learn the history. And we'll talk a lot more about the history of the teams in the NL Central. It's tough to talk about it as a division because divisional play didn't start until 1969. These teams were all in different divisions. They created the Central Division, in 1994, the strike year. They created the Central Division. So there isn't as much history that way. But the teams have a history. So we're definitely going to cover those in future episodes of Central Intelligence. And please do take time to leave comments if you're watching this on YouTube, if you are catching this as as a podcast or whatever. If you can catch me on social media. I'm at Feckless Baseball on social media. I'm sure if you reached out to the Slasher Sports website, there's a way to leave a message or a contact. Let's keep the conversation going. When I shamelessly self-promote to Central Intelligence on Twitter, on Facebook, on social media, okay, there's always a place to leave a comment. Leave a comment. You don't have to agree with everything. Leave a comment. Okay. Help us gather evidence to prove that the NL Central is such a unique and special division and why all baseball fans need to pay more attention to it. Call me an idiot. I don't mind if you call me an idiot. Just explain to me why I'm an idiot. If you say you're an idiot and that's all, okay, maybe I might not respond and I might get a little angry. I've been known to get a little animated when I'm talking about baseball. But this is your show. I'm the one babbling on and on, maybe. I'm the one that's been given, the honor and the chance to talk about National Central League, National Central Division of Baseball on a regular basis. But it's a conversation with everybody out there, with baseball fans in general, but especially fans of NL Central teams. And if you make a good point, I'm going to say you make a good point. If you prove me wrong, I'll come on the air and say, look, you know what? So-and-so sent me a tweet, sent me a comment, and they were right. I misspoke. I got my facts wrong. Yeah, I'm not, I want this to be our show. And that's really the thing with OK Baseball, with Slasher Sports, certainly here at Central Intelligence. We want that relationship. We want those conversations. So make sure you keep that going. So I've probably taken up enough of your time for this week. Again, we have new episodes of Central Intelligence drop every Thursday. Please do like and subscribe. It lets us know that people are not only listening to the podcast, but they want to know more about other programs. And there's all sorts of programming available across all of the different Slasher Sports areas, whether it be Slasher Sports Cinema, OK Baseball Podcast, Slasher U, Suki Suburbia's Honeydew Project. It's all part of the Slasher Sports family. We want to know, are we getting across? Are we doing what we're setting out to do? Let us know. We would love to have you. I'd love to incorporate things, really great comments into the show as we talk about. As I say at the end of every week, here's hoping that your favorite National League Central Division team does something worth talking about in the next episode of Central Intelligence. I'm Steve Feck. I'll talk to you again next episode. Thanks for watching. For more great content and to stay up to date with Central Intelligence and the OK Baseball Podcast, click subscribe now. Put away the files, lock up the safe. We will see you here next time.